Appalling Lies and Inspirational Missives from Anglesey. By William Kerwin. Part 4. Article 31. A talk given by Dr. Gwennan Hartson to Carrig Blydear Anti-Depression Social Group. June 2006. A talk titled, Still Looking for the Switch to Change the View. Dr. Hartson soon left her role as Senior Clinical Support Officer for the Borough Council, suffered a nervous breakdown, divorced her county councillor husband, and retreated to a polyandrous community in Dwiren. The only reported statement by Dr. Hartson since was in 2018, when she observed on the community blog that the broadband remains crap around here. Dr. Hartson begins. No matter which window I look out of, and no matter what panorama is continually revealing itself to me, I inevitably end up wishing to change the view, not the window. I never seem to be able to find the switch to change it. I reason that it must be here somewhere. As day gives way to the between light of early evening, I begin to see my reflection, and that is one view I feel completely unable to change. It is an old face, tired and made haggard by life's cruel and unnecessary challenges. Each passport renewal is a slap in the face for things not achieved, or even attempted. I am old, and my strength has been stolen from me day by day. I envy my friend's youthful exuberance and confusion at what path to choose, and who still has the gift and luxury of time to make errors and begin once again. Is it the worst curse of aging to grow envious? I have been too busy in life, feathering the nests of the belligerent and caring while others went away on holidays. Rather than fade into the darkness, my reflection grows more pronounced and coherent, defined by the pain and tiredness of a life badly lived for oneself. I reciprocate in silence and covet all those ignorant of their good fortune. I cannot superimpose that last passport face on the window. The optimism that accompanies fine weather must become more robust because of the challenge of stormy days. Summer is the bouncing, effortless optimism of the young, where color and light imbues all around. I comfort myself that those who had dreams for me are no longer among us, yet they all move within me, and I find disappointment in their photograph faces, and consequently I can no longer look too closely at them, thus losing touch with the potential they once saw in me. One last gasp attempt. The 1,000,000-to-1 chance. A Hail Mary throw. Risk the turning of the card with casual equanimity and expect to win the prize. To not be a loser. To be a winner with achievable minor aspirations, and to find that switch to change the view, and rekindle that softness that is evidence of attractive happiness within. Nothing is more attractive to people and good fortune than happiness. I must first find the playing cards, before I even begin trying to find one worth turning over on the table. Confident no matter what fortune reveals. And I must make myself attractive to bring the deck of cards closer, and to stack the odds in my favor. I must begin to believe that I have arrived here, after clambering over the architecture of my own misfortune, and conversely, if I have arrived here, then it was because of my own design, conscious or unconscious. Or a consequence of the action of others who care. I must recognize and acknowledge this self-designed architectural feature that I employed as an obstacle on life's already bumpy road. I already have the map where the decision points were obvious in retrospect. There, in my experience and intelligence, lies the means to reduce the chances of happiness from 1,000,000-to-1 odds to something acceptable and attainable. We all possess programs that either make the hardware work, arrive at an incorrect conclusion, or crash. What generally makes us grind to a halt is interference from others. However, if you find yourself in the middle of bastards, it's either time to run, or time to engage with a pointy stick. Article 32. Benjamin J. Clark, Contribution to Anglesey Animal Trust Monthly Magazine. 1998. Titled, Do Anything to Get the Dead Cat to Turn. Mr. Clark served 9 months in prison in 2001, after he had unwisely revealed in his online autobiography that rather than cremate pets who fell off the perch, he would taxidermize them. Prior to sentencing at Talon Crown Court, Judge Hubert Roberts observed in his summation that it was not the mutilation of dead, much-loved pets that was his downfall, but partly the fact that he would seek out healthy animals to terminate their already brief lives. However, he continued, that you would further intrude on the dignity of that animal by employing it to create the appalling scene of a Roman orgy in your attic, is unconscionable. A request to court by Manarth Ween WI to use the animal orgy scene to raise funds for its national charity campaign was rejected. The orgy went up in flames at an unknown location, although there exists, supposedly, a police video of the conflagration, filmed with 3 cameras and amateur lighting. Mr. Clark's contribution reads, This is a saying I came across in a novel, concerning a detective seeking to solve the murder of a foreign national in China. It is a tale of his journey through the political machinations of a system that does not wish him to solve the problem. For a natural detective, that goes against the very essence of who he is. However, it is a significant problem, and he must solve it, whatever the cost. When trapped by circumstance and unable to make any progress, he chooses to do something desperate to create a new angle for investigation. He refers to this as doing anything. Anything to get the dead cat to turn. An enormous amount of inertia accompanies depression, whether it is in its acute form, that is short-term, or chronic, which is its persistent form. In the latter, there is a sense of futility to any intended action, and consequently that action is not carried out. In the former, there is a great deal of rocking backwards on your heels, as you struggle to generate the motivation, or motive force to impel you forwards. Sometimes, it is merely the taking of the very smallest of steps that drives you onwards. How easy. You just take a step. When that step is monstrous, how easy. To leave the house took a friend about 3 hours the other day, and then he tells me that he would move through his community with his head down, lest people see the fear in his eyes. Sometimes the smallest step just leads to another small step, which is no easier. There again, by taking these consecutive steps, they can become habitual. Good results are merely habituation with best practice. In your own context, if you find yourself troubled by inertia in whatever form, take a step forward, and see if that makes the dead cat turn. If not, then take another, and another. Eventually, you'll no longer be bothered by the dead cat, other than hope that someone will take it away and give it a decent burial. Article 33. William Roberts, farmer and former carer. Observation made to a friend after suffering a nervous breakdown under the pressures of farming and relentless family health issues. Titled, There's a Bus Out There. Mr. Roberts shared his thoughts, thus. Out there, just beyond your horizon, there's always a bus out there somewhere. It's out of control, and is being driven by a mad clown whose eyes are revolving in its head. It knows you are here somewhere, but for now, it can't find you. In the meantime, sheep and rabbits are sharpening their survival skills diving out of its path. My best friend had an accident, a pretty bad accident, and it was a forceful reminder just how much I value her. We were talking, she in her hospital bed and I sat beside attentively. We've got less time than we think, she said. Finally, I realized that. Don't I just know that I thought. When you reach a certain age, memories of dead family and friends are constant companions and reminders. However, it does help to be reminded quite starkly that our personal clock is counting down to zero. Unless you are a person with faith, then it won't be starting up again on the other side until the day of judgment. For my part, I hope that I will be judged more on my deeds and not on my pathetically poor attendance in chapel. I am too solitary a creature to be religious, and feel embarrassed by group incantations of responses to a priest. I tell my friend that I could never be a Catholic because I don't have the knees for it. You're up, then you're down, and then you're up again. I have never been blessed by a priest or minister, and would never wish to be. It would feel peculiar and uncomfortable to have it done in front of others. So, I am depending heavily on my deeds. I think I'll be fine. I subscribe to the daft notion that the world was not created for the purpose of religion, but as an experiment by the Almighty, to prove to himself that he could create an intelligent species that can live in harmony. To validate the independence of the experiment, the Almighty threw in a wild card. An independent variable. Namely, free will. Right up until that moment everything had been proceeding quite nicely. It's been over 18 months since my duties to my parents were fulfilled. And I know that I did my very best to the very end. I coped with the last 2.5 years of my mother's life, and one thing I learned during that time, was how important it is to keep your nerve in a crisis, because it will pass. I kept my nerve as crisis crashed on crisis, followed crisis. 18 months on, I am still exhausted. I nearly cried on a couple of occasions, but that's all. I know that the bus is out there somewhere, and sometimes I think I can hear it. Sat next to my friend in hospital and in her home afterwards, holding onto her foot to stop me falling, both of us seemed struck dumb with the theme that has preoccupied us both since the accident. The bus and mad clown are out there always, and all the while the universe is doing all, even slapping us in the face, to remind us that life is fleeting. We have tuned ourselves out of the voice of the universe. The voice that keeps shouting. Live your life. Live your life. Don't depend on promises, because here is all you have and now is all that you will ever be able to control. Be as happy as the man with the duck. Choose to be stupid, blind and deaf to those who would have you be what they want you to be. Act well. Be kind to others. Especially yourself. Chase that nice boy or girl, because there will come a day when you see how old you are, when you come across him or her again. You will regret not having been brave enough to say something while they were good looking and young. Decline invitations to be subservient and be cowed. Look the bully in the face and tell them to bugger off. The mad clown will one day catch your scent, because despair has its own unique fragrance. Plow your own road instead, seeking joy and fulfillment, and when the mad clown in his bus does come across you by accident, stand there in the middle of the road snarling at him. Point a very sharp implement at the bastard, to show him that you've been looking for him as well, and it is he who had better watch out. Article 34. William Roberts, farmer and former carer. Titled, Sometimes a life crash is the only way forward. Mr. Roberts said, "In the end, I could no longer manage my bank accounts. The strain of being a carer for my wife was keeping me up nights. My wife died in July, and very soon after, I voluntarily gave up attempting to balance the impossible, and surrendered to the crash that was overdue. Over the next 6 months, I found myself adjusting how I moved around the large empty spaces in our house. I eventually learned that there was no guilt in sleeping unfettered by a medical timetable. In the end, I managed to persuade myself that I had done all that I could, and I gently regained control by abandoning myself to embracing every moment of my busy day. When I was a carer, I found that I wanted to crash every single moment of the day. Yet I couldn't. I was driven by love to care to the detriment of my own health and an inability to allow others to intervene, because I believed that I was the only expert in my wife's care. I kept my nerve until my duties were discharged according to my wedding vows of love and commitment. It was impossible for me to do anything other than fulfill those vows. I learned that a widow or widower should capitulate and embrace the waves of grief as they strike. As soon as you can. It is the most painful of exercises, yet you must realize that all you have been doing by staying at the limit of your heart's endurance for too long, is to push away the tidal wave of emotion bearing down upon you. Best get it over with as soon as you can. I hold the view, that those for whom you have cared with all your heart, wish that you now dedicate your life to yourself. That, more than anything. Slow motion crashes extend unnecessary suffering. Be wise and kind to yourself once your duties have been discharged. Without shame, allow it to be your full-time occupation for a short while, and life will improve. Such tragedies teach you just how many good friends you have. None of us have all that many, but just one or two are more valuable than an army of silent and invisible sympathizers. Article 35. Genevieve McDermott, relentless member of committees. Titled, Never Happier Since Going Invisible. This is a statement from her online blog. Mrs. McDermott was deselected as a county councillor in a coup, following her revelation of gross incompetence and corruption prior to the auditor's investigation. Her allegations were justified. However, unlike a salad, revenge against her was hot, swift and costly to her reputation. Former county councillor McDermott shared her thoughts. Seeking prominence always ends in failure, because it demands an audience. And an audience is almost always made up of a group of fickle individuals. Which, I suppose, is the essence of being human. Prominence demands the exchange of favors, and that lasts as long as one has the power to proffer those favors. Each person who achieves prominence is merely a stepping stone to another coming up behind. Prominence is generally such a precarious thing, and can never be more than a short-lived illusion, because it is based on popularity. Contriving to achieve prominence demands a designated other person to struggle against publicly, and then replace. Achieving prominence then makes you the one to struggle against, and then you yourself are replaced. Being invisible removes a person from games of prominence. When a person realizes that he or she is one of the great unwashed, he or she can be liberated to live a decent and successful life, free from paranoia and anxiety. Invisible people are rarely noticed by game players, as they drift among and through vicious people like an anti-boson not attracting attention. To be insignificant is to live a life free from immoral and unethical contamination. It probably brings you closer to living in the moment, without always anticipating anything other than unexpected opportunity that life may bring you. Being invisible spares you the exhaustion of gameplay, and any need to compete with others for the same ends. To be visible is to knowingly assume a burden. And to become invisible is to acknowledge the futility of games that inevitably fade away with the passing of time, and leave no mark of your having been there. Article 36. Titled, Don't Bend the Compass. By Anonymous. 2009. It reads thus. You may have worked this out yourself by now. Mind you, there again you might not. But your conscience is firmly embedded in your tummy. Don't allow anyone to persuade you otherwise. Your tummy knows when things aren't right, especially if you have just done something against your entire upbringing and moral code. In most of your transactions with people and the world, you will inevitably find that a wholesome and easy life comes with a calm tummy. You won't succeed to achieve this state continually. Nonetheless, maybe doing your best is more than adequate to becoming a good human. If you keep bending your moral compass, it will snap, ill health will inevitably follow, and those who care for you will begin to move away. Be wary of how you speak, and avoid bigotry and cruelty in your language, unless you are talking about politicians, football teams or bullies. Do bullies have a tummy conscience? Probably not. Narcissists and sociopaths rarely do. Those who find it easy to bend their compass, surround us, and are always endeavoring to draw us into their lies to justify their actions. Remember, despite the frequency of repetition, repeated propaganda still does not constitute a truth. Article 37. From the Reverend Henry Jenkins of Kemlin, Diary Entry October 27, 1942. Titled, When I'm late through laziness, then God will inevitably send out his tractors to make sure I'm really late. The Reverend Jenkins really was too fragile and kind a person to be a skillful minister to his rural flock, and in the time of war assumed far too many burdens on behalf of the bereaved families. He was a very spiritual person who should have remained an academic, as his wife wished. Henry Jenkins died at the age of 39, worn down by the pains of others. Reverend Jenkins's diary entry reads, If you have ever doubted that there is a supernatural external force acting on your lives, then God's tractors are incontrovertible evidence to the contrary. To the tractors, you may add the unexpected sudden appearances of buses, traffic lights, lame horses and over-careful elderly drivers ahead of you. It is curious that we believe in a supernatural force called luck when we fill in our football pools, and dismiss such a notion when no luck attends our endeavors. Yet, were we to evaluate our life as it is revealed to us, this particular moment against previous events, we would surely see many coincidences. When gathered together, these coincidences show either an unconscious direction to our lives, or the intervention of an external force. If we were to evaluate those sequences of coincidences further, then we might detect a sense of witty irony, in that each chain should have led us to a happy outcome had we but attended to them. External force versus human diffidence surely. However we choose to evaluate, God has his tractors parked and ready to send out onto Anglesey's narrow roads and lanes, to intervene and slow my progress whenever I am late because of laziness or tiredness or lack of attention. Article 38. Eulogy read out at the funeral service of William Henry Thomas in Llangefni, February 2006. Titled, Tens of Thousands of Gigantic Little Kindnesses. The eulogy reads thus. Tell me, I beg you, what have I achieved in my life? Just what have I achieved? Nothing. I have done nothing that has made the blindest bit of difference to the world. I've done nothing big. Acts and deeds? These acts and deeds are what the giants achieved. Me? Nothing have I achieved that anyone will ever remember in any history book. My list of achievements amount to little more than gossip that has disappeared somewhere in the universe, like a bunch of aimless electrons probably wishing that they bore messages of great discovery that other electrons would be jealous of. We invested our futile ambitions on projects we didn't pursue to a satisfactory conclusion. My father was a quiet man who came back from the war and married Ma'am. Today, many young people could not even give you the correct date for the Second World War, and yet it was the most defining period of European and world history because democracy was saved. There were appalling battles and destruction. My father told me he that remembered being sat on a hill outside the town of Caen in northern France waiting to break through German lines and head for Berlin and Hitler's bunker. He spoke of a sky black with Allied bomber aircraft that dropped their explosives on the town. Dad told me it was the most magnificent and dreadful thing he ever saw. Marching through Caen afterward, he described it as a town reduced to rubble and death in only a few hours. He never spoke of warfare other than when he was injured and of swollen dead horses at the side of the roads killed by who-knows bombs. Dad never made it to Arnhem to save the troops trapped there because the road was too narrow, and he was trapped in miles and miles of army trucks that went nowhere. His first experience of conflict were the D-Day landings, about which he never spoke. Dad was only a single Tommy among millions of Allied troops, and each Tommy made a difference in the end. Today, the minister spoke of my father as a man of 1,000 quiet and gentle kindnesses, and everyone who is attending has warm memories of him. Dad possessed a deep voice and a lovely sense of humor, and I suspect it was only with his friends at the British Legion that he could share his war stories. Dad did not achieve much of great import during his life except pass on his gentle wise ways, and not willfully imposing his values and standards on others. People respected him, and similarly inclined people were his friends. We do our best to be like him, and the youngest in our family is the same without realizing it. Dad was a man of 1,000 gentle and quiet kindnesses and is every day reincarnated in our words and interactions with people. His values have now passed to a third generation and going strong. His kindnesses and values are transmitted beyond his life and will continue long after their source has been forgotten. Article 39. Former Police Sergeant Donald MacLeod. Addressing Women's Institute, Trevor Branch. April 2005. Titled, Nothing Heightens Insecurity More Than Too Much Security. Sergeant MacLeod spoke thus. It is a trait set deep in our genetic makeup that someone out there is desperately coveting their neighbor's asses and is intent on stealing them. There are commandments about coveting asses that consider it a very mortal sin. Life is full of mortlers, as a friend would have it, and as a child she would frequently confess to her best friend's sister that she had just committed yet another mortler. Usually a bad thought or a partial lie with fingers crossed. The compromised innocence of their childhood was defined by the severity of the Catholic faith, which seemed to interfere with almost every aspect of their childish existences. Stealing is worse than coveting someone's ass, I learned as a policeman. The latter is merely an intention, and the former an act. And when we were children, there were far more opportunities in our little town of 4,000 inhabitants to commit mortlers. There was a rather exotic creature living in our neighborhood. He was unemployed. And even as children we seemed to regard it as a sin that a man who could work and easily find work, chose not to. It was a Thursday evening in October 1966, and a cloudy somber one at that, when I rushed home from one of those day-long football matches we played. To normally return home covered in mud. They were those days before we coveted designer trainers, and it was either a pair of old scuffed school shoes or black plimsolls, and, of course, really muddy knees that no amount of scrubbing could remove all the mud from the creases. I remember my bath night of sitting there pushing away a slick of grey water, a blend of me and muddy scum. Getting out was difficult as the top layer would cling to my skin. Cold water was then poured over me. Refreshing, it was not. That evening, the match was still going on and would continue until about 9 o'clock during our summer holidays. I was very, very thirsty and rushed off home, which was no more than a few hundred yards away. The key was in the door as it always was, and I went straight to the broad Belfast sink we used to have in our council house kitchen. That was before Dad upgraded our kitchen after Margaret Thatcher invited him to invest in his own castle. Considering it was a kitchen, it was always the coldest room in the house, and for some unfathomable reason, Dad decided not to place a radiator in it, when the council fitted central heating. There was no one in the house. My mother and father had probably gone down to visit Auntie Jane and Uncle Even, 2 estates down below the prefabs next to the football field. The black and white television in the living room was on, and I wandered in with my cup of water to see what was on. After tea time, there was never anything on for children, and I was more intrigued by the somber tone of the broadcaster than the dark images on the screen. I was drawn further in. I had to, because my eyesight was bad then and I used to spend most evenings sat right next to the television to see anything. When I eventually had my eyes tested and Ma'am chose a pair of glasses for me, I went to school expecting all manner of specky 4 eyes insults. It hardly ever happened, because the form teacher had warned everyone. I remember playing football, right back for the college team, and was so proud to learn that one of the opposition forwards had been heard to counsel his fellow players to, watch out for specs, he's suicidal. That remains one of my proudest sporting moments. The opposition were scared of a stick wearing spectacles. I sat down on my usual chair and slowly my 8-year-old brain worked out that there had been a disaster. A coal spoil tip had collapsed on a village in faraway South Wales, and buried a school full of children. It was Aberfan. It meant nothing to me then, and there were long lines of miners digging the black mud with their hands in hope of reaching their sons, daughters, nephews, grandchildren and pulling them up to the light. As an adult, I feel a strange emotion when I reflect on Aberfan, the simple and satisfying joy of my childhood evening playing football, while the world ended so abruptly elsewhere. I stayed watching for a while, but my immature mind could not fathom the emotion, and only vaguely understood the significance of the escalating number of lost lives, of children and school teachers. And that the last thing most of them ever saw was a wall of black mud fall on them through the roof and windows. I went back out to play, and I don't think I mentioned it to any of the others, continuing the game because I lacked the vocabulary or thinking to get anywhere near it. I left the house as I had arrived, by the front door, not even paying attention to the key in the door. There was always a key in the door, as there was at Brian, Gareth and Alan's homes further up the street. We always took it for granted that it would be there until the last thing at night, when Dad would take it out and place it on the windowsill next to the door. The key disappeared from the door late in my teenage years, and we would enter round the back. That key had become nostalgically significant in many debates as to the honesty and trustworthiness of neighbors, and even people passing down to town. I didn't see a key in our front door for decades after that, since we had all been given our own front door keys. That was until my mother became unwell and forgetful. Sometimes the door would be open. She hadn't noticed and was sat in the living room or kitchen. The worst thing that ever happened in her later years was when she came home from the shop to find the door open, with the keys hanging from the lock and a cat sat on the carpet relaxing in the sun. Apparently, it looked decidedly discomfited at being disturbed. That was a favorite story I clung to in our conversations. Until Mam forgot where home was. Now there are no keys in any door. And every knock on the door is a potential ne'er-do-well after my golden apples. I have kept my front door locked for many years, and removed the key even when I am at home, after a murder was committed no more than 4 fields away. We had a full security system of cameras and intercoms fitted in the office. I remember offering the observation that the office felt far more insecure afterwards, than when it had with an open door policy for visitors. 2 side notes. Side note 1. From Mr. Henry Pugh, Holyhead. European Union Referendum Public Meeting. 2016. Quoted as saying, "Never let the facts get in the way of a good opinion." Side note 2. From a frequently quoted anonymous councillor, Community Planning Committee meeting in 2016. Known for his frequent pithy ambiguous observations. Quoted as saying, "Good manners conquer most situations. And when they don't, there's always the option of a pointy stick." Article 40. William Frederick, Kate, Talon. Failed Christmas Greetings Card Entry. September 2015. Titled, "We Are Born Without a Parachute." Mr. Frederick's Christmas card entry, adjudicated as interesting, intriguing, but rather too long. It reads, "From the moment you are born until the day you die, you are falling, forever falling and tumbling through space and time. To offer you encouragement, be unhappily reassured that almost everyone around you is also falling, and exercising as much control and effect on the world as are you. Forever tumbling, we strive desperately to reach out and grasp for something or someone to arrest our fall, and vainly attempt to bring a false stability to our forever tumbling. We only ever achieve happiness when we forget that we are falling, or choose to not care at all, and abandon ourselves to the journey with joyful glee. In the workplace, we are always falling from one injury to the next, as those who seek to design our lives with lies and contrivances demonstrate profound awareness of our imbalance, and distract us from our own agency. Our tumbling decelerates as others assert control, thus impacting on all aspects of our lives, work, home, emotion and potential happiness. The greatest tumbling of all in our brief lives is when we love. Our tumbling through space and time accelerates and decelerates respectively according to how much fear we construct, and how much joy we embrace. The first rule about what to do when you are feeling insecure in love, is to shut up, and say nothing, act normal. Good tumbling buddies are as rare as hen's teeth, so when you come across one, then invest every single iota of energy in your heart and soul in making that tumble buddy happy. For one of every energy unit you invest, you will receive a return beyond calculation. As we carry on tumbling, we will encounter the same people and circumstances over and over again, although we rarely seem to learn from previous encounters, and greet each other with the same bag full of contrived expectations. We should allow the person to have learned or grown since we last tumbled into each other, that life may have brought experiences that have challenged and changed a person's philosophy for life and people. If, after a few encounters on the grand tumble, the person remains cold, aloof, or indifferent, then do anything to avoid that next encounter. Learn to swim while tumbling. It's not that difficult, since the only skill you require is awareness. Reread the contract with life you are presented with at your birth, and commit yourself to live according to the expectation that anything is possible. Leave the world a far better place than you came upon it. Introduce your children to that responsibility. Because living our lives according to the contract with life will more or less guarantee that your tumbling time will be full of reward and laughter. Laughter will become your constant companion and backdrop to your loving living and tumble time. And now you know. It is all so simple when you take the time. So dear friend, hold my hand to tumble and fall with me.